Agent Thompson wasn't having a good day. It was Monday, the coffee tasted like a burnt sock, and the air conditioning in the FBI's Nashville field office had decided to take an early retirement, leaving the stale air. Across from him, Agent Miller, fresh-faced and earnest, tapped a pen against his chin, his usual cheerful demeanor dimmed by the oppressive humidity. Their boss, Assistant Director Davies, strode in a folder clutched in his hand like a sacred relic. Davies was a man who spoke in clipped tones and viewed personal anecdotes as a sign of weakness. Today he looked particularly grim. "Gentlemen," Davies began, dropping the folder onto Thompson's desk with a thud that echoed in the quiet office. "We have a new assignment, high priority, confidential." Thompson raised an eyebrow. "Another senator? With a mistress, sir?" he drawled, trying to inject some levity into the stifling atmosphere. Miller, ever the stickler, shot him a warning glance. Davies ignored him. "This concerns a public figure. Someone whose influence the Bureau believes could be detrimental, or, at the very least, needs to be monitored." Paused, his gaze sweeping over them, daring them to interrupt. "The subject is Elvis Presley." A beat of silence. Thompson felt a snort escape before he could stop it. Miller's pen clattered to the desk. "Elvis Presley? Sir, with all due respect, what could the king of rock and roll possibly be doing that requires FBI surveillance? Besides, selling out arenas and shaking his hips. Agent Thompson, your flippancy is noted. The Bureau has reservations. His lifestyle, the potential for him to exert undue influence on the nation's youth. The White House is particularly interested in maintaining a certain moral fiber, and Mr. Presley's public image, while popular, is seen by some as questionable." Thompson sighed. "So we're glorified gossip columnists now, staking out Graceland to see if he's staying out past curfew." Could already picture it. Him hidden in a bush, observing a sequined jumpsuit. It was absurd. Miller, always more diplomatic, spoke up. "Sir, are we talking about drug use or any specific criminal activity?" Davies adjusted his tie. "Our intelligence is vague. Agent Miller, rumors, innuendo, but significant enough to warrant a deeper look. We need to ascertain who he meets, what he truly occupies his time with. We need to build a comprehensive profile. Is he a public nuisance or something more?" He pushed the folder across the desk. "All the preliminary information is in there. Your low-profile base of operations. Discretion is paramount. No one, absolutely no one, is to know about this. Not local law enforcement. Not even other Bureau personnel unless absolutely necessary." Thompson flipped open the folder. Inside were grainy black and white photos of Elvis from various stages of his career. Young, rebellious, grinning, older, more refined, but still undeniably Nedoc. There were newspaper clippings, concert reviews, and a brief, dry summary of his career. Read like a government document trying to comprehend a hurricane. "So we're looking for evidence of moral decay, sir?" Thompson asked, a sarcastic edge to his voice. "Wild parties, drug deals, subversive political meetings hidden behind a velvet curtain?" Davies didn't crack a smile. "You are looking for information, Agent Thompson, unbiased. Factual information about Mr. Presley's activities. No preconceptions, no assumptions, just what you observe. And the fan hysteria, understand?" "Understood," Sir Miller said promptly, already beginning to flip through the pages in the folder, his brow furrowed in concentration. Thompson, however, still felt a bitter taste in his mouth. He joined the FBI to catch criminals, to unravel intricate plots, not to babysit rock stars. This felt like a waste of taxpayer money. A PR exercise for an administration obsessed with projecting an image of wholesome Americana. What could Elvis Presley possibly be hiding that was worth the Bureau's time and resources? More importantly, what could they possibly find? He imagined the headlines, FBI uncovers Elvis's secret love for peanut butter and banana sandwiches. It was ridiculous. "You'll have a budget for a safe house, vehicles, and any necessary equipment," Davies continued, oblivious to Thompson's internal grumbling. "You'll report directly to me daily, no exceptions. This is sensitive, and remember, gentlemen, the unexpected often hides in plain sight." Thompson closed the folder, the weight of it feeling heavier than he thought it should. Memphis, hot, humid Memphis, and Elvis Presley. He pictured the iconic pelvis gyrating on stage, screaming fans, the flashy cars. This was going to be a long, tedious assignment. He fully expected to find nothing but the mundane excesses of a rich, famous man. Parties, perhaps. A few too many late nights. Nothing criminal, certainly nothing that justified the FBI's involvement. He looked at Miller, who was now meticulously highlighting passages in the file. "All right, Miller," Thompson said, pushing himself up from his chair. "Looks like we're going to Graceland. Let's hope Elvis has some decent air conditioning." As they packed their bags, Thompson couldn't shake the feeling that this was going to be the most boring surveillance job of his career. He imagined long hours staking out a mansion, listening to bad rock and roll, and documenting the precise moment Elvis ordered another fried peanut butter sandwich. He expected glitz, expected arrogance, expected the tired tropes of celebrity. Life. What he didn't expect was for anything to surprise him. But then, as Davies had said, the unexpected often hid in plain sight. Thompson just didn't realize how true that would turn out to be. They boarded the plane to Memphis, their minds filled with preconceived notions of what they would find. Completely unprepared for the reality that awaited them, Memphis, in the summer, was a sticky, sweltering beast. The air hung heavy with humidity, the scent of barbecue smoke, and the faint underlying hum of distant blues music. Thompson and Miller set up their base in a nondescript bungalow a few miles from Graceland. Blending into the quiet suburban street, it was hot, dusty work, far removed from the climate-controlled comfort of their Nashville office. Their initial days were predictably uneventful. They established a surveillance rotation, taking turns observing Graceland from various discrete vantage points. They had the usual array of equipment: binoculars, telephoto lenses, long-range microphones. Their target, Elvis Presley, was seemingly living a life that was both incredibly public and oddly private. Day 3, Thompson muttered into his walkie-talkie to Miller, who was currently positioned in a van disguised as a utility vehicle. Subject is currently walking his dog, a basset hound, around the perimeter of the property. No suspicious individuals sighted. No secret drug drops, just dog walking. Copy that. Thompson Miller's voice crackled back, sounding just as bored. Earlier, he spent an hour playing touch football with what appeared to be members of his entourage, very vigorous. Hardly a sign of moral decay, unless excessive athleticism is now a federal offense. Their days were filled with these kinds of mundane observations. Elvis would wake late, often emerging from Graceland in the early afternoon. He'd sometimes drive one of his many flashy cars, a pink Cadillac, a Tom Stutz Blackhawk, but usually just to run errands. They noted trips to the grocery store, not for champagne and caviar, but for milk, bread, and apparently a lot of bananas. They saw him getting gas, stopping at a local diner for coffee, even visiting a hardware store. "He's buying gardening supplies," Miller Thompson reported one afternoon, staring through his binoculars at Elvis, who was carefully selecting bags of soil and a new trowel. And not just any gardening supplies, organic potting mix, top quality. What kind of degenerate spends his time worrying about compost? Miller chuckled. Maybe he's growing something illicit, Thompson. Highly potent tomatoes. It was a running joke between them. They were looking for something scandalous, something secret and illicit, and all they were finding was domesticity. Elvis spent a surprising amount of time at home. When he wasn't playing sports with his Memphis Mafia, his inner circle of friends and cousins, he was tinkering in his garage. They could sometimes hear the faint strains of gospel hymns or blues riffs, or increasingly in his garden. "No wild parties last night," Thompson reported one morning, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Just a movie night. The light from his den was on until about 2 a.m. Looks like a Western, probably John Wayne. Very wholesome." "Same here," Miller chimed in. He had some friends over earlier in the evening. Sounded like a poker game from the laughter. Then they ordered pizza. And I mean pizza, Thompson. Not caviar and champagne. Just pepperoni. The narrative they were building for their daily reports back to Davies was becoming increasingly dry. Subject: observed engaging in recreational activities consistent with a typical American citizen. Live Nichel appears generally sedate when not performing. Thompson felt ridiculous. One afternoon, something slightly out of the ordinary happened. Elvis left Graceland alone, driving his black Cadillac, and headed not towards a recording studio or a fancy restaurant, but a quiet, residential neighborhood on the outskirts of Memphis. Thompson followed, keeping a safe distance. Elvis pulled up to a modest, slightly run-down house. An elderly woman, her hair tied in a neat bun, was struggling to carry a heavy bag of groceries up her porch steps without a moment's hesitation. Elvis was out of his car. He didn't wear sunglasses or a disguise. He just walked up to her, took the bag and carried it inside for her. Thompson watched, bewildered. The woman looked startled at first, then smiled, and they chatted for a few minutes. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language was friendly, comfortable. Elvis laughed. She patted his arm, and then he left, waving goodbye. He didn't sign an autograph, didn't pose for a photo. It was just a simple act of neighborly kindness. Did you get that, Miller? Thompson asked, his voice low. Elderly woman appears to be a private citizen. No apparent connection to his usual circle. Very polite. Thompson scoffed. He's Elvis Presley. He's supposed to be surrounded by screaming fans and sycophants, not helping little old ladies with their groceries. Later that week, a similar incident occurred. Elvis was at a local diner, enjoying a simple breakfast. A young waitress, clearly nervous, spilled a glass of water all over him. Thompson braced himself for a celebrity tantrum. Instead, Elvis just chuckled, put her at ease, and then, as he left her an incredibly generous tip, far more than the cost of his meal. Enough to make her gasp his, "Not yet." They were small, almost unnoticeable acts of courtesy and kindness, but they were accumulating. Thompson, despite himself, was starting to notice a pattern that didn't fit the celebrity stereotype he'd been given. He'd expected arrogance, a sense of entitlement, but Elvis seemed grounded and surprisingly humble. "He's been visiting a local children's hospital every other week," Miller reported one evening, his voice tinged with a strange mix of disbelief and something else. Admiration. "Not for a publicity stunt, Thompson. He goes in the late evenings after visiting hours. He spends hours in the oncology ward. He just sits with them." Thompson felt a strange twist in his gut. This wasn't the Elvis he'd been sent to find. This was something else entirely. The daily reports continued to be mundane, devoid of any juicy details, but Thompson felt a growing unease, a sense that they were missing something, or rather, that what they were finding was so far from their expectations that it felt almost like a deception in itself. Davies would not be pleased with a report detailing Elvis's good deeds. He was starting to realize that the unexpected might not be what the Bureau had hoped for, but it was certainly compelling. The initial shock of Elvis's seemingly ordinary life began to wear off, replaced by a growing sense of bewilderment. Thompson and Miller continued their surveillance, meticulously documenting every move, every interaction. And with each passing day, the pattern became clearer, more defined, and increasingly contrary to their preconceived notions. It wasn't just the occasional good deed anymore. It was a consistent, almost daily series of low-key, unassuming acts of generosity and compassion. He just paid for a young couple's entire meal at the diner, Miller reported one afternoon. His voice hushed. They looked like they were struggling, whispering about the bill. Elvis, completely unnoticed by anyone else, slipped the waitress a $50 bill, told her to put it on their tab, and then left through the back door before they even knew what happened. Thompson, watching from across the street, saw the waitress's startled expression, then her knowing smile as she approached the couple. Elvis was already gone. "He's like some kind of benevolent phantom," Thompson muttered, shaking his head. "Doesn't want credit, doesn't want attention, just does it." They observed him at Graceland, too. His Memphis Mafia weren't just hangers-on. They were like family. And Elvis treated them with genuine affection, not as servants. He'd sit with them, listen, intently offer advice, and sometimes they'd see him quietly slip, one of them a wad of cash, not like a handout, but like a brother. Their reports back to Davies were becoming increasingly bland. Subject: observed engaging in domestic pursuits, no unusual activities, continues to maintain a low public profile within Memphis. Thompson knew Davies was getting impatient. He could almost hear the assistant director's clipped tones demanding more, something scandalous, something useful. But there was nothing, or was there? One morning, Elvis left Graceland unusually early. Before dawn, Thompson, on the night shift, scrambled to follow. Elvis didn't take one of his flashy cars. He drove a modest, unmarked sedan, an older model that blended passing into the pre-rush hour traffic. He headed towards the poorer side of town, an area Thompson knew was riddled with unemployment and struggling families. Elvis parked the car on a dark street, obscured by the shadows of a neglected oak tree. He got out wearing a simple jacket and a baseball cap pulled low, a large duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He walked quickly, purposefully down a narrow alleyway that led to the back of a dilapidated building. Thompson, his heart beginning to beat a little faster, pulled his car further down the street and grabbed his binoculars. This was it. This had to be it. A drug deal, a secret meeting, something nefarious. Finally. But what he saw next baffled him. Elvis pushed open a back door. Leave, vive, weave. The door creaked open, revealing a dim light within. Elvis stepped inside and the door swung shut behind him. Thompson waited. Minutes stretched into an hour, then two. He saw no one else enter or leave. What was he doing in there? He checked his watch. Elvis emerged, looking a little tired, but his stride was still purposeful. The duffel bag was gone. He got back into his unassuming sedan and drove straight back to Graceland. Miller Thompson radioed, his voice tight with a mixture of frustration and intrigue. Subject: just spent 2 hours in an abandoned warehouse on Elm Street, then left. No one else was seen. He had a duffel bag when he went in, didn't have it when he came out. A duffel bag, you say? Miller replied, his voice picking up on Thompson's intensity. Could be anything but 2 hours alone. That's odd. They decided to investigate the warehouse. Later that day, after Elvis had returned to his regular routine, Miller approached the building, pretending to be a surveyor. The door was locked, but he found a cracked window on the side. Peering in, he saw nothing but dust and cobwebs and a faint outline on the floor where something had recently sat. No drugs, no weapons, no signs of anything illicit. But then Miller noticed something else. Tucked into a corner, half hidden by some old crates, was a stack of brand new, unworn children's shoes. Dozens of them. And next to them, several boxes of what looked like new toys, still in their packaging. Thompson, Miller radioed, his voice laced with confusion. I'm in the warehouse. There's nothing here but kids' stuff. Shoes, toys, all brand new. Thompson frowned. Kids' stuff, what in the world? This wasn't a one-off. Over the next few weeks, they observed Elvis making similar clandestine trips to various locations. A quiet church basement, a community center after hours, even a small, struggling orphanage tucked away in a remote part of the county. Each time he went in with duffel bags or boxes and emerged empty-handed, having spent anywhere from 1 to 3 hours inside. And each time their subsequent investigations revealed that he had delivered supplies, food, clothes, books, medical equipment, or just basic necessities. Always discreetly. Always after dark or in the early morning. He's stocking soup kitchens, Miller stated almost reverently. After one such outing, he's delivering school supplies to undeserved schools, he's funding repairs for old community centers, and he's doing it all himself, without a single camera, without a single public announcement. He wants no fanfare. Thompson stared at the surveillance photos on their makeshift corkboard. Photos of Elvis not on stage but carrying boxes of food, or quietly talking to a group of children at an orphanage, or fixing a leaky pipe in a church basement. The man in these photos was a different Elvis, one they hadn't known exist. He wasn't just a rock star, he was a silent benefactor, a one-man charity organization operating completely in the shadows. Davies is going to think we've gone, Soft Thompson said, more to himself than to Miller. He'll think we're making this up. Miller shook his head. We have photographic evidence, Thompson. And these people are the ones he's helping. They don't even know it's. Keeps his head down. Or he uses an alias. The realization dawned on Thompson, chilling him slightly. The unexpected wasn't a scandal. It was a secret life of profound good deeds. And the truly unexpected part was not just what Elvis was doing, but how he was doing it. With such humility and determination to remain anonymous, they had been sent to find dirt, and they were unearthing gold. And Thompson, despite his cynical nature, found himself feeling something he hadn't expected. Respect. And a growing sense of discomfort about their own mission. They were supposed to expose him, but what they were finding was something that deserved to be protected. The daily reports became increasingly challenging to write. Thompson and Miller were caught in a peculiar bind. How do you report on a celebrity who spends his offstage hours performing acts of selfless charity without sounding like you've been swayed by fan adulation? Davies, predictably, was growing restless. Agent Thompson, Davies' voice crackled over the phone, thin and impatient. Your reports continue to be mundane. Subject observed driving a car. Subject observed tending to his garden. Are you certain you're focusing on the objective? We need actionable intelligence, not a daily diary of a domestic life. Sir, we are observing everything, Thompson replied, trying to keep his voice neutral. Mr. Presley's activities appear to be, for lack of a better word, remarkably wholesome, Davies scoffed. Wholesome, Agent? This is Elvis Presley. We're talking about the man who gyrated his way into the hearts of millions. Think deeper. Focus on his associations, his private moments. Find something subtling. Dace wouldn't understand. He couldn't. How could he explain that the substantial was the quiet, unassuming grace they were witnessing? Their focus shifted. They knew Elvis was engaged in multiple charitable efforts, but there was one particular activity that kept reoccurring, shrouded in more secrecy than the others. It was the driving force behind his early morning drives to the seedier parts of town. The reason for the anonymous vehicle? The duffel bags. It started with a specific building. A derelict old music hall, once vibrant but now boarded up, nestled deep in a forgotten industrial zone. Elvis visited it frequently, always under the cloak of night. He never entered from the main street. He always used a discreet side door accessible only through a narrow, unlit alley. He's been there 3 times this week, Miller Thompson whispered into his comms. One sweltering evening, his binoculars trained on the shadowy alley, always between 10 p.m. and midnight, and always alone. What could he possibly be doing in an abandoned music hall? Miller, positioned in a different blind, responded, I've run the address. It's listed under a shell corporation, untraceable, and it's been vacant for years. From the outside, it looks like nothing but a collapsing husk. Passing train rumbled by, shaking the old building, and, for a split second, a shard of light escaped from a crack in the boarded-up windows. It was enough. Light, Thompson exclaimed. adjusting his binoculars. Inside, he's got lights on in there. And I think I hear something. Faintly carried on the humid night air, a sound reached them. It wasn't music. Not exactly. It was more like a cacophony of individual notes. Piano being played haltingly, a guitar string being plucked, a drum tapped tentatively. It sounded like practice. Or, more accurately, like learning. Thompson and Miller, dressed as repairmen, managed to get permission from a neighboring business to briefly access the alley, claiming a sewer issue. As Miller pretended to inspect a drain, Thompson, with a well-practiced move, quickly installed a tiny long-range audio bug near the side door, hidden among some overgrown ivy. That night, they listened. The sounds were clearer now. The header woven with them, a soft "encourier now." "That's it, Jimmy. Little slower on the G chord. You'll get it." Then another voice, younger, timid. I don't know, Mr. Elvis. My fingers just don't work right." "Nonsense," Elvis's voice, warm and reassuring, replied. "Music isn't about perfect fingers, son. It's about heart. And you got plenty of that. Let's try it together. 1, 2, 3. Then a gentle strumming of a guitar, accompanied by a smaller, more hesitant one, and a voice unmistakable in its rich baritone, singing softly, helping the boy find the rhythm. Thompson and Miller exchanged wide-eyed glances in their surveillance. "He's teaching them," Miller whispered, a look of profound astonishment on his face. "He's running a secret music school." Over the next few nights, the audio feed confirmed it. Elvis wasn't just donating instruments. He was personally teaching a small group of children and teenagers. These weren't privileged kids. Their timid voices, their hesitant questions, the snippets of conversation Thompson and Miller overheard painted a picture of children from tough backgrounds, children who likely wouldn't have access to music lessons otherwise. They heard names like Maria, Carlos, Little Joe, Sarah. Children from the impoverished parts of Memphis, children whom society often overlooked. Elvis was incredibly patient. He didn't just teach guitar or piano. He taught them about rhythm, about passion, about finding their voice. They heard him explain basic music theory, then transition into the raw emotional power of the blues or the uplifting spirit of gospel. He brought in different instruments, a battered drum kit, a few violins, even a saxophone. Sometimes he'd sing with them, not the grand, powerful voice of a stage performance, but a softer, more intimate tone, guiding their young voices, building their confidence. Talked about his own struggles, about learning to play by ear, about the power of music to transport you, to heal you. "Music ain't just notes on a page," they heard him tell them one night. "It's freedom. It's hope. It's a way to tell your story even when nobody else wants to listen. Don't ever let anyone tell you you ain't good enough. You got a song in your heart. You play it loud and proud." Thompson found himself leaning closer to the speaker, captivated. He'd always dismissed Elvis as a commercialized pop star, a manufactured product. The voice coming through the bug, the man speaking to these kids with such genuine warmth and dedication, was anything but. This was the real Elvis Presley, stripped of the glamour, raw and real. The duffel bags and boxes he brought in were no longer a mystery. They contained sheet music, spare guitar strings, drumsticks, new reeds for the saxophone, books on music history, and sometimes even simple snacks and drinks for the kids. He was not just teaching them. He was nurturing them, providing a safe haven, a sanctuary in a world that often offered them little hope. This was the secret mission Davies had unknowingly sent them to uncover. Not a crime, but a profound act of quiet, selfless generosity. It was completely unexpected, utterly heartwarming, and utterly unreportable in the way the Bureau would want. Thompson realized then that their mission had fundamentally shifted. It wasn't about surveillance anymore. It was about witnessing something extraordinary, and perhaps about protecting it. The revelation of Elvis's secret music school for underprivileged kids fundamentally altered Thompson and Miller's perspective. The daily grind of surveillance, once tedious and cynical, now held a new kind of intrigue. They weren't looking for dirt anymore. They were looking for understanding. They wanted to know the full scope of this hidden world. They expanded their surveillance, not to catch Elvis doing something wrong, but to piece together the complete picture of Graceland's secret garden, as Miller had dubbed it. They identified the children who attended, a mix of ages, mostly teenagers, but some as young as 8 or 9. They came from various low-income neighborhoods, some walking for miles, others dropped off discreetly by parents or older siblings, who seemed to know something special was happening. Thompson and Miller confirmed that Elvis was indeed the primary, if not sole, instructor. He also occasionally brought in a couple of older, trusted musicians, often blues or gospel veterans, who would mentor the kids, adding different perspectives and style tricé. But more importantly, they learned confidence, discipline, and the joy of creation. The agents started listening to the audio feed with genuine interest, sometimes even with a shared, silent smile. They heard Elvis patiently explain a difficult chord progression, or humorously recount a story from his early days, playing in dives, making the kids laugh. They heard him talk about the importance of practice, of perseverance, and of using their music to express their feelings, even the tough ones. Mr. Elvis, they heard a young girl, Maria, ask one night, her voice shy, "Will I ever be good enough to play on a real stage?" And Elvis, without hesitation, replied, "Maria, you already play on a real stage. Every time you pick up that guitar and let your heart sing. That's a stage, and believe me, honey, you're more than good enough. You just gotta believe it your throat, listening to that." This wasn't the manufactured persona. This was raw, honest mentorship. He thought about his own estranged teenage daughter, who'd once dabbled in piano, but given up, discouraged by a harsh teacher. He wondered what she might have achieved with a mentor like Elvis. Miller, always the more emotionally open of the two, was clearly moved. "He's not just teaching them music," he observed one night, watching Elvis through a high-powered scope, coaching a boy on the drums. "He's teaching them about life, about self-worth. It's incredible, Thompson." They also observed the reactions of the kids. They arrived, looking tired, sometimes sullen, carrying the weight of their young lives. But when they left, hours later, their faces were alight, their steps lighter. Carrying their instruments like precious treasures, they were transformed, even if just for a few hours. The financial aspect also became clear, and talent. He was pouring a substantial amount of his own money into this project. He was paying for the lease on the dilapidated music hall, overseeing its slow but steady renovation, always done by small, local, anonymous conductors, and providing the instruments, sheet music, sound equipment, and even transportation for some of the kids who lived too far away. He even ensured they had warm meals or snacks during their late-night sessions. He's funding this entire operation out of his own pocket, Miller calculated one morning looking over bank statements. They'd managed to discreetly access all links to a series of shell companies and trusted intermediaries. Millions, Thompson. He's quietly funneling millions into this and other charitable efforts. And it's all meticulously hidden. No tax write-offs, no public announcements. Thompson rubbed his temples. He's essentially running a clandestine philanthropic empire. While the FBI is investigating him for what exactly? Being too famous. The irony was biting. Their mission was to find dirt, to uncover moral failings. Instead, they had found a man of profound moral integrity, operating in secret to uplift the most vulnerable members of his community. The Bureau, in its suspicion, had stumbled upon a genuine American hero, one who actively avoided the spotlight for his good deeds. Thompson began to see Elvis not as a celebrity, but as a man with a deep-seated empathy that belied his public image. He realized that the flamboyant stage persona, the flashy clothes, the public eccentricities, they were a shield, a way to navigate the immense pressure of fame, perhaps, but behind it, away from the cameras, was a quiet, compassionate soul. Their internal struggle intensified. What were they supposed to report? Subject. Observed, demonstrating extraordinary compassion and generosity, secretly funding and operating a music school for disadvantage, there proving himself to be a pillar. Davies would have their badges morality. To report nothing or worse, to fabricate something felt increasingly wrong. They were witnesses to something truly special, something that deserved recognition, not suppression. The ethical lines of their duty were blurring, colored by the stark contrast between their initial assumptions and the heartwarming reality unfolding before their eyes. Thompson felt a shift within himself. The cynicism that had been his constant companion was slowly eroding, replaced by a reluctant admiration. This wasn't just a case anymore, it was an education. An education in what true fame, when coupled with a good heart, could achieve. And it left him with a gnawing question. How do you protect a man's good deeds from the very institution that seeks to expose him? The culmination of their observations led Thompson and Miller to a profound understanding of Elvis Presley. The unexpected was no longer a mystery. It was a living, breathing testament to genuine human kindness. The abandoned music hall, Graceland's secret garden, was the heart of it all. One particularly rainy night, the agents found themselves parked. A little closer than usual, the downpour providing an extra layer of cover. Through the water-streaked windows of their van, they watched the children arrive, some huddled under broken umbrellas, others simply soaked to the bone, but all of them with a light in their eyes that belied their outward circumstances. Inside, Elvis was already there, tuning a guitar. The stage, though still old, was now cleaned and adorned with some simple but effective lighting. Acoustic panels were being installed. The instruments were kept pristine. It was becoming a true sanctuary. Thompson listened intently as Elvis welcomed each child, calling them by name, asking about their day, making them feel seen and valued. He didn't just teach chords, he taught resilience. He encouraged them to write their own songs, to express their fears and their dreams. Maria, Elvis said one night, "You wrote something last week, didn't you? About the river. Would you share it with us, Maria?" The shy girl hesitated. It's not very good, Mr. Elvis." "Doesn't matter if it's good to anyone else," Elvis gently corrected her. "Matters if it's good to you, matters if it's honest. Come on, we're all family here." Maria, after a moment, picked up her guitar and with a trembling voice began to sing a simple, heartfelt melody about the Mississippi River, its power and its indifference, and her own small dreams. When she finished, the room was silent for a beat. Then Elvis began to clap, followed by the other children. Maria's face, usually so reserved, bloomed with a shy, triumphant smile. "See," Elvis said, his voice full of pride, "that's music. That's your music. Don't ever let anyone silence that." It wasn't just music. Thompson noticed that Elvis often stayed behind after the lessons, long after the children had gone home. On those nights, they would observe him quietly cleaning, putting instruments away, or even helping the contractors with the renovations. He was physically invested, not just financially. One evening, a young boy named Carlos, no older than 10, fell ill during a session. He was clearly feverish and weak. Without a second thought, Elvis didn't call an ambulance or pass him off to one of his staff. He gently picked up the boy, carried him to his own unassuming sedan, and drove him directly to a private clinic he had quietly arranged for the children's use. Thompson followed, watching as Elvis stayed with Carlos for hours, talking to the doctor, waiting for the fever to break. He was a guardian, a father figure, a lifeline. The depth of his commitment was staggering. He wasn't doing this for image, for praise, or for any personal gain. He was doing it because he genuinely cared. He saw the potential in these forgotten children, the light in their eyes that no one else bothered to notice, and he nurtured it with his time, his talent, and his boundless generosity. This was the completely unexpected part of their surveillance. The king of rock and roll, the flamboyant showman, was in his quiet moments a humble, dedicated philanthropist, personally investing in the lives of the most vulnerable. He wasn't just throwing money at problems. He was getting his hands dirty, offering his personal touch, his heart. Thompson thought about the Bureau's initial concerns: moral turpitude, detrimental influence. The irony was so profound, it was almost comical. Elvis Presley. The subject of their surveillance was actually a quiet force for good building up the community and fostering hope where there was little. His influence was undeniably profound, but in the most positive, uplifting way imaginable. The longer they observed, the more Thompson and Miller realized that this secret mission was Elvis's true legacy. Far beyond the records and concert was the legacy of lives touched, dreams ignited, and futures rebuilt. He was giving these kids something priceless: a chance, a voice, and a belief in themselves. The agents found themselves no longer just detached observers. They were complicit, they were witnesses, and with each passing day, the moral dilemma of their mission became heavier. How could they expose something so profoundly good? How could they betray the trust of a man who unknowingly was teaching them more about humanity than any FBI academy ever could? The initial cynicism had completely evaporated, replaced by a deep sense of respect and a growing determination to protect the extraordinary secret they had uncovered. The impact of Elvis's secret life wasn't confined to the children he helped. It began to subtly but profoundly affect Agent Thompson and Agent Miller. Their daily routines of stakeouts and meticulous note-taking transformed from a chore into a strangely compelling human drama. Thompson, the hardened cynic, found himself re-evaluating his entire perspective on fame, wealth, and public image. He had always believed that power corrupted and that celebrity inevitably led to self-indulgence. Elvis, the epitome of fame, was proving him wrong. One quiet act of kindness at a time. Thompson started to notice the small, often unnoticed acts of kindness, too. A cashier's polite smile, a stranger holding a door. He found himself being more patient, more observant. He even called his estranged daughter, something he hadn't done in months, just to ask her about her day. Miller, already more inclined towards idealism, found his belief in humanity renewed. He had seen the raw underbelly of society in his FBI work, the selfishness and greed. Witnessing Elvis's boundless generosity was a balm to his soul. He started volunteering at a local soup kitchen on his off hours, something he'd always thought about but never acted upon. He found himself humming the gospel tunes. Elvis often sang with the children, a lightness entering his step. It's like he's trying to quietly balance out all the noise and flash of his public life, Miller remarked one afternoon, watching Elvis walk an elderly woman from the music school to a waiting taxi. Like the bigger he got, the more he needed to ground himself in something real, something meaningful. Thompson nodded slowly. He's not just a rock star. He's a man trying to do good in a world that's constantly demanding something from him. They started to see the ripple effect of Elvis's actions beyond the music hall. They'd follow Maria, the shy singer, and see her performing at a small community fair, her voice gaining confidence, her smile brighter. They'd observe Carlos, the boy Elvis nursed back to health, now diligently practicing his drums, his school grades improving, his spirit lifted. Elvis wasn't just teaching them music, he was instilling hope and opportunity. One evening, while discreetly observing the music school, Thompson saw something that struck him particularly hard. A young boy, perhaps 10 years old, was struggling with a guitar. He looked frustrated, close to tears. Elvis knelt down, put an arm around the boy, and started talking to him softly. Not about the guitar, but about his day, about what was bothering him. Slowly the boy opened up, revealing a difficult situation at home. Elvis listened, his expression grave, then offered quiet words of encouragement, practical advice, and a promise to look into ways to help. He wasn't just a music teacher, he was a mentor, a counselor, a safe harbor. Thompson remembered his own childhood, growing up tough without much guidance. He realized that this wasn't just about Elvis being a good person. It was about the profound, guiding power of one individual's compassion on many lives. Their internal reports to Davies, however, remained frustratingly vague. Subjects' activities continued to be primarily domestic and artistic. In nature, no evidence of illicit or subversive behavior, continues to maintain a low profile within his community. Engaging with various individuals, no discernible pattern of concern. They knew they were walking a fine line, providing just enough information to satisfy Davies without betraying the remarkable truth. The moral conundrum weighed heavily on Thompson. They were FBI agents sworn to uphold the law, to report fact. But what if the facts, if reported without context, would harm an innocent man who is doing immense good? What if the Bureau's judgment, based on preconceived notions, was fundamentally flawed? The idea of exposing Elvis's secret charity work to a cynical public, or worse, to a government looking for any excuse to discredit him, felt like a profound betrayal. Miller articulated their shared conflict one quiet night. Thompson, if we tell Davies the truth that Elvis is running a secret music school for poor kids, he's either going to think we've lost our minds, or he'll twist it into something unauthorized use programs, possibly influencing minors, without proper oversight. You know how they spin things, or he'll just dismiss it and keep looking for something else, something he wants to find, and then Elvis's privacy, his whole purpose behind doing this quietly. They understood then that their mission had evolved beyond simple surveillance. It was now a mission of protection. Protection of Elvis's privacy, protection of his good deeds, and protection of the children whose lives he was changing. The FBI had sent them to find something unexpected, and they had found it. But the biggest surprise wasn't Elvis's secret. It was the realization that their own ethical compass had been recalibrated by witnessing it. They were no longer just agents following orders. They were custodians of a heartwarming secret, grappling with the profound implications of their discovery. Just as Thompson and Miller settled into their role as silent guardians of Elvis's secret, a complication arose, one that threatened to unravel everything. It didn't come from Davies or the Bureau, but from the periphery of Elvis's own world. They noticed a new face around Graceland, a slick-haired man in an expensive suit who began showing up more frequently than usual. He wasn't part of the Memphis Mafia or the usual entourage. His name, Thompson learned after some discreet digging, was Julian Blackwood, a minor music industry figure with a reputation for being opportunistic and ruthless. Blackwood started, shadowing Elvis, popping up at his regular haunts, trying to get in on meetings, pushing for new ventures. He wasn't subtle. Thompson heard snippets of Blackwood's conversations, all revolving around unprecedented opportunities and expanding the brand. "He's a vulture," Thompson grumbled to Miller one afternoon, watching Blackwood try to corner Elvis at a local record store. "He smells money, or more likely, influence." Miller nodded, his brow furrowed. "He's been asking around too about Elvis's private investments. Said he heard rumors of unconventional philanthropy and wanted to leverage them for mutual benefit." This sent a chill down Thompson's spine. Unconventional philanthropy. Blackwood was clearly sniffing around the edges of Elvis's secret world. One evening, Blackwood followed Elvis's unassuming sedan as it headed towards the music hall. Thompson and Miller, in their own vehicle, immediately recognized the threat. They had to act fast. They couldn't let Blackwood discover the school. Elvis parked unaware. He was being followed and disappeared into the alley. Blackwood pulled up a few minutes later, parking his flashy car conspicuously. He got out, looking around, a calculating glint in his eye. He started walking towards the alley entrance. "Miller, you distract him," Thompson ordered, his voice low and urgent. I'll make sure Elvis knows what's up. Miller, quick thinking, faked a minor fender bender with Blackwood's car, slamming his foot on the brake just as Blackwood was about to enter the alley. A loud squeal of tires, a slight jolt, and Blackwood was suddenly distracted, fuming, inspecting his bumper. Meanwhile, Thompson, moving swiftly, slipped into the alley. He knew he couldn't just walk up to Elvis and say, "FB, I hear you're being followed." He had to be subtle. He reached the side door of the music hall, which Elvis sometimes left ajar for a minute before locking, pushed it open just enough to see Elvis inside, talking to one of the kids. Thompson caught Elvis's eye, a silent, urgent gesture. Elvis, surprisingly perceptive, immediately picked up on Thompson's unusual presence and serious demeanor. He paused his conversation, his gaze questioning. Thompson mouthed two words, clear and distinct. "He's here." He gestured vaguely back towards the alley entrance. Elvis's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of understanding passing through them. He nodded almost imperceptibly. He knew what Thompson meant. He knew his secret was on the verge of being exposed. Thompson slipped back out of the alley just as Blackwood, still grumbling about the fender bender, looked his way. Miller was doing a magnificent job of playing the bumbling, apologetic driver, demanding insurance information. Elvis inside wasted no time. Within minutes, the lights in the music hall dimmed. The children, previously lively, became quiet, then quickly gathered their instruments, guided by Elvis with hushed instructions. He ushered them out through a different, even more obscure exit at the very back of the building, which led to a different alley and street. Thompson and Miller knew about this exit, but Blackwood wouldn't. By the time Blackwood finally managed to disentangle himself from Miller, he stomped into the alley, found the side door ajar. It peered into the music hall. It was dark, silent, and seemingly empty. Just an old, dusty building. He stood there for a moment, confused, and slammed the door shut in frustration. He paced for a bit, then returned to his car, defeated. Thompson and Miller watched him drive away, a shared sigh of relief escaping them. They had protected Elvis's secret. The incident was a stark reminder of the precariousness of the situation. Blackwood wouldn't give up, and their own position with Davies was growing more untenable by the day. The phone rang in their safe house later that night. It was Davies, and his voice was colder than usual. "Thompson, Miller, I've received a rather intriguing tip from a source who claims Mr. Presley is engaged in clandestine activity, Miss Atis. Sir, we have thoroughly investigated that location. It appears to be an abandoned property. Mr. Presley occasionally drives by it, but we have no evidence of any sustained presence or activity." It was a lie, a carefully crafted deception, but Thompson spoke it with a conviction that even surprised himself. Davies was silent for a moment. Their time was up. The truth, or a version of it, was about to come out, and the future of Graceland's secret garden and their careers hung precariously in the balance. The news of Davies' imminent arrival cast a heavy shadow over Thompson and Miller. They spent the night in a tense, hushed debate. How could they protect Elvis, the children, and their own integrity? The options were bleak. "We can't just let him walk in there and discover the school," Miller stated, pacing the small living room of their safe house. "Not when Elvis is actively trying to keep it secret. It would be a betrayal. And if we tell him the truth that Elvis is running a charity for underprivileged kids, Davies will spin it into something insidious," Thompson countered, rubbing his temples. "Or worse, he'll think we're compromised, sentimental fools. Our careers would be over, and Elvis would still be under a microscope. His good deeds turned into a public spectacle." The dilemma was agonizing. They were sworn to report the truth, but the truth in this context felt more damaging than any lie they could conjure. They had witnessed genuine, selfless acts of kindness, and the thought of exposing it, of letting the cynical machinery of the Bureau dissect and potentially destroy it, felt morally repugnant. "We have to make sure he finds nothing," Thompson finally said, his voice firm, a decision hardening in his eyes. "Absolutely nothing. When Davies gets there, that music hall has to be exactly what it appears to be. An abandoned building. Miller stopped pacing. How? We can't just tell Elvis. That would break protocol. Compromise the entire operation. We don't have to, Thompson replied, a plan forming in his mind. We know Elvis's routine. He won't be there during the day. The kids won't be there either. We just need to make sure there's no evidence left behind. No instruments, no sheet music, nothing that indicates activity. They spent the remaining hours before dawn meticulously planning. They knew where Elvis kept the spare key to the music hall's side door, hidden under a loose brick. It was a risky move, breaking into their own surveillance, target's secret location. But it was their only option. As the sun began to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Thompson and Miller drove the unassuming sedan to the music hall. The building still looked desolate in the early morning light. They located the brick, retrieved the key, and quietly slipped inside. The music hall, usually alive with faint echoes of practice, was still and silent. The stage lights were off. The instruments carefully put away by Elvis after the last session were tucked into their cases, hidden in a secure, reinforced closet. It was evident Elvis had taken precautions to keep his activities discreet. Thompson and Miller worked swiftly, efficiently. They swept the main hall, checking under tarps and behind crates. They looked for anything that might suggest recent activity. Stray sheet music, an abandoned pick, a child's forgotten drawing. They found a few minor things, a small worn drumstick on the floor, a smudged pencil, and carefully removed them. They checked the small kitchenette area, making sure no food wrappers or drinks remained. They ensured the bathroom facilities were clean and unused. They even swept the floor for footprints, making sure their own were the only fresh ones. They sprayed a faint, generic cleaning scent to mask any lingering odors. It was a covert cleanup operation, ensuring the space looked exactly as it was described on paper. Abandoned and forgotten? As they finished wiping down surfaces and ensuring nothing was out of place, Thompson paused. He looked at the empty stage, the rows of silent chairs. He could almost hear the phantom echoes of children's laughter, the hesitant notes, Elvis's encouraging voice. He felt a pang in his chest, a strange mix of sadness and pride. They were erasing the visible evidence of something beautiful to protect it. They locked up, returned the key, and headed back to their safe house just as the city was waking up. They prepared their final report carefully, crafting a narrative of their observations. It was a masterpiece of omission and vague generalities. They highlighted the mundane, emphasized Elvis's domesticity, and downplayed any unusual sightings, always redirecting back to the abandoned nature of the music hall. When Davies arrived later that morning, his face tight with expectation, Thompson and Miller greeted him professionally. They drove him directly to the music hall. Davies, clutching his own folder, pushed open the side door. He stepped inside, his eyes sweeping across the dusty, silent space. He walked onto the stage, kicked at a loose floorboard, and peered into the shadowy corners. He went through the back rooms, even tried to open the locked closet, but it held firm. "This is it?" Davies asked, his voice laced with suspicion. "This is the clandestine activity I'd been tipped off about." "Yes, Sir," Thompson replied, his voice even. "As our reports indicated, it's an abandoned building. Mr. Presley may have driven by it. But there's no sustained activity here that would suggest anything out of the ordinary, just an old, neglected structure." He pulled out a small flashlight and shone it around, but found nothing. No secret passages, no hidden compartments, no evidence of children's activities, no instruments. The carefully orchestrated cleanup had been effective. "Perhaps your source was misinformed," Sir Miller offered, feigning innocence. "Or perhaps they saw Mr. Presley briefly and exaggerated their claims." Davies frowned, his jaw clenched. He was clearly unsatisfied, but he had no tangible evidence to contradict them. He stood in the quiet, dusty hall, his expectations crumbling around him. "Very well," he finally said, his voice cold. "This concludes the on-site inspection. Return to the safe house and complete your final report. I expect it to be thorough, Thompson, and it had better align with what I've seen here today." As they drove away, leaving Davies to his frustrated silence, Thompson glanced at Miller. They hadn't found what the Bureau wanted, but they had protected what truly mattered. They had made a choice, and in doing so, they had redefined their own understanding of duty and integrity. The final report was a masterpiece of bureaucratic evasion. Thompson and Miller crafted a document that detailed Elvis Presley's daily life with meticulous, mind-numbing banality. It spoke of his primarily domestic routine, his engagement in recreational activities, and his limited public appearances within the local community. There was no mention of secret music schools, no accounts of discreet charitable acts, and certainly no hint of the quiet, compassionate man they had come to know. Davies read it with a skeptical eye, but with no tangible evidence to contradict their observations. He had no choice but to accept the official FBI file on Elvis. Presley was stamped "closed, no further action required." The case was filed away, destined to gather dust, a testament to a mission that had found nothing, because what it had found was too extraordinary to be understood by the institution that sought it. Thompson and Miller packed up their safe house, the silence in the small bungalow feeling different now. It was no longer the oppressive quiet of boredom, but the contented hush of a secret kept, a good deed, preserved before they left Memphis. Thompson took a detour. He drove past the music hall. From the outside, it looked exactly the same, abandoned, forlorn. But Thompson knew better. He knew that later that night the side door would creak open and the faint sounds of music and laughter would once again fill the air. The secret garden remained safe and thriving. He didn't see Elvis, and he didn't try to. Their interaction in the alley, the shared understanding, was enough. A silent pact had been forged between them. An unspoken acknowledgement of respect and protection. Months later, back in the sterile, air-conditioned confines of the Nashville office, life slowly returned to normal. But for Thompson and Miller, nothing was truly the same. Thompson found himself less cynical, more observant of the small acts of kindness that punctuated everyday life. He called his daughter more often, listening more, judging less. He began volunteering at a local youth center, teaching basic self-defense. Miller, for his part, was more openly changed, continued his volunteer work at the soup kitchen. And occasionally he would hum a gospel tune, a quiet smile playing on his lips. He started taking guitar lessons inspired by the pure joy he had witnessed in that hidden music hall. They never spoke of the Elvis Presley case again, not to anyone else. It remained their shared secret, a powerful, quiet testament to the unexpected depths of human nature. They had been sent to find something scandalous, and instead they had found something profoundly beautiful. They had found integrity, compassion, and a man who, despite his monumental fame, chose to quietly devote himself to changing lives, one young musician at a time. Years passed. Elvis Presley continued to perform, to record, to live a life under the relentless glare of the public eye. The headlines focused on his records, his movies, his personal struggles, his sometimes eccentric behavior. Thompson and Miller knew the real story, the one hidden beneath the layers of fame and speculation. They knew about Graceland's secret garden and the quiet, giving heart of the king. They would occasionally catch glimpses of him on television or hear his songs on the radio. And each time they would exchange a knowing look, a silent understanding passing between them. The world saw the legend, the icon. They had seen the man, the teacher, the humble benefactor, and in that quiet knowledge, Thompson found a peace he hadn't known before. He had learned that true greatness wasn't always found in grand public gestures or in the adoration of millions. Sometimes it was found in the hidden corners of an abandoned building, in the patient strumming of a guitar, and in the quiet, unwavering belief in the potential of every child. The FBI had put Elvis Presley under surveillance, expecting to find scandal. What they found instead was the unexpected, heartwarming truth of a legend's most profound and enduring legacy. And that in itself was the greatest discovery of all.